If everything had been given to me in life where I'd have a silver spoon in my mouth, parents were together, and I lived a nice, comfortable life like my children have, perhaps maybe I wouldn't strive so hard. But because when I was coming along, people told me I'd amount to nothing, that I was a bastard child, and being honestly saying that because I didn't have a father and what have you, they knew my situation. I've even had relatives tell me I wasn't going to get anywhere. Because of all that, as I worked very hard to just prove and show them that I could. Even when I was going into this business, I was told that you're not going to make it in this business. Who's going to buy your services for training and teaching? Who wants to buy how to be taught how to work safely on a hazardous waste site? Well, needless to say, you can see the numbers of which I've accomplished over the years and the success I've had. And 21 years later, I'm still in business. Well, thank you, Mr. Parker, for inviting me to speak with you, and my pleasure. Yes, I want to talk to you a little bit about Professional Safety Training Service, which is PSTS, the acronym. Professional Safety Training Service was founded back in 1988, part-time while I was still working for a company that's very large, Fortune 500 company, a division of waste management, a huge company called Chemical Waste Management. At the time, I was the Regional Health and Safety Director, that is the Northeastern region from Maine to Florida over to Midwest. And in that particular time, I was teaching environmental health and safety training for that company. And while I was there, I started my own business part-time. And then in 1992, when companies were starting to get phased out and this company was happening to this company, I decided I would go ahead and take the layoff. I worked out of my house for about 3 or 4 months. And then I moved into a facility on Springdale Road in Cherry Hill. I was there 6.5 years, and believe me, it was a very small place, no windows, it was all like concrete. I felt like I was in a dungeon, like a mausoleum. Every time I came out, I believed I was being resurrected. But in 1999, I came to this facility that you're interviewing me in, and of course I named it Caltech, had a big grand opening with senators, congressmen, the governor of the state, and quite a few people, and it was quite a nice grand opening. We've been here since July of 1999. My son works for me. His name is Curtis, the same name as mine, Calvin Williams, but we call him Curtis. And we have trained since 1988 over 33,000 people throughout the United States, Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Guam, and American Samoa. So the business has been very, very good. And of course, in the same learning center, Caltech Learning Center, we teach other courses, such as health and speaking courses. We teach people how to speak and how to lecture to be more confident speakers.
Now that's with the
Universal Speakers Bureau, which is another business. Just kind of collectively, we teach the same thing in the same place, of course, all these courses.
And how long has that been in existence?
1986, 2 years prior to my starting this. And I worked that on a part-time basis.
Okay. Now tell us a little bit about your educational background.
Well, my educational background has been on staggered. It's kind of a success story, I guess you would say, because I never saw my real father, and I was like born out of wedlock, which is no big deal. It happens to a lot of people. But my mother's like 15 years old and kind of taken advantage of, I suppose. I understand the story to be. Gave me to different people to take care of me and were very abusive. I ran away at an early age, 9.5, 10 years old. I was born during Depression. So naturally ended up on Skid Row, what they call Skid Row. Then they call it homeless and displaced persons. They call them hobos and bums then. And I ended up on the bread line and soup line right there in 7th and Vine in Philadelphia, which is now Chinatown. I know what it's like to sleep on the street, abandoned cars and buildings, on the grate and cardboard boxes. And I learned an awful lot down there then. Actually, I had left school to do that, and I was just a kid. But the fact is, I learned a lot because down there at that particular time, there were doctors, lawyers, very, very bright people
Yes.
who had escaped from Wall Street, so to speak, if you will, ended up on the street. And even though it was in the 40s, and I was just a little kid at the time, even though there was a lot of prejudice, specifically at that time, prejudice has poverty has a common denominator. Everybody's drinking out the same wine bottle, and everybody was hugging each other and together on the grate together because of the fact that everybody was very, very, very poor. I ended up, and to make a long story short, someone took me in. I remember walking down the street one day with no shoes on, bags, or cardboard wrapped around my feet, and around November, about November of that year, and someone took me in and kind of gave me the opportunity to work at the place there, and no pay, just gave me a place to sleep, and then eventually they helped me, and I ended up going to Bordentown Manufacturing Industrial School, which is an all-black military school up in Bordentown, New Jersey. It ended in 1953, the school itself, but I had been around for years. It was a military school, so I ended up being a lieutenant in the school and working on the farm. And so from that place, I ended up going into the military and still hadn't finished school. And the question that you asked me about education, when I came out, I used my GI Bill, and I got hurt in Korea.
Oh.
I got out and I used my GI Bill, and I got an associate degree in mechanical engineering and still hadn't finished high school. And I had a lot of great opportunities. I was the first young supervisor, black supervisor, that is, in New York shipping, Camden, at a time of very prejudice, and many other places I worked. I excelled because I could read blueprints. I went to school for drafting engineering. And it wasn't until 1999, when I was a contract negotiator for electric boat, General Dynamics in Groton, Connecticut, that I decided that I was going to take my GED. And I went out, passed it. And then years later, when I was working for a company in Philadelphia called Catalytic, I was an engineering manager in charge of audit and inspections and safety, which is my background. I decided to go to college. I went to Antioch University, which the company paid for. I ended up getting my bachelor's. And then many years later, even though I'm in my own business, I decided I would go out and get my master's and also my doctorates.
What's your master's
My
in?
master's in journalism.
And what's your Ph.D.
And my
in?
Ph.D. is in environmental engineering.
Wonderful.
Environmental engineering, because that's what I do. I teach environmental health and safety training for a living under professional safety training services. And journalism, I've written a couple of books.
Yes.
What is called The Instant Inspiration, and the other one is How to Be a Confident and Effective Speaker and Presenter.
Yes. And what's your website?
I have 4 websites.
Oh.
www.PSTS, that stands for Professional Safety Training Services.com, is for Professional Safety Training Services. www.UniversalSpeakersBureau.com is for the Universal Speakers Bureau. www.Confidence Builder Publications is for my publishing company, which I wrote my books through. And www.CalvinWilliams.net is for my engagements for speaking.
Oh, wonderful. Now we're going to talk about speaking a little bit. Going back to, let's say, your high school days, when you were younger, high school, early 20s age, what were your speaking skills like? Or did you always have that as you do today?
I learned to speak in church. My grandmother is a very Christian woman, and I kind of emulated her. She was very much singing, what have you, but I also admire the way the preachers preach with a lot of motivation back in those days, and I felt that I might want to be a speaker, and so every opportunity I had as a young kid, even though, like I said, I had to raise myself, I had an opportunity to speak when I spoke. And over the years, I developed it, and I emulated people like Les Brown many years later, and Tony Robbins, and what have you. And then I had a lot of speaking engagements. I spoke at a lot of different places, and it kind of motivated me to do more of it. So basically, that's why I had to get into it, because it was something I like to do. I was born as an artist, so I used to go around and I used to sell my artwork, and so I had to speak to people in doing that. So as a result of doing all that, have to speak to people, and then spoken in churches, what have you, I developed the speaking.
So prior to, let's say, if we go back to that time frame, would people say that you were an articulate individual? Did they know something that you didn't know that you had?
Well, they encouraged me to speak. I got to a point where I was speaking in colleges. I spoke on graduations, what have you. But then I also had some speaker development training myself.
Okay.
I went through the Toastmasters. I went through Toastmasters from the beginning to the end through the company I worked for in Catalytic. In fact, after I went through and I became the top of the speaker, the highest position that you could have in Toastmasters, I started teaching and coaching some of the speakers. And we had seminars that we used to handle. So I got a lot of training. I did receive an awful lot of training through Toastmasters.
Now, when you're in your profession with PSTS or even with the Universal Speakers Bureau, has anyone been surprised at the way you speak?
I've had people say you speak very well. And of course, naturally, being a minority individual, African American, 95% of my people that come to my company happen to be people that are not minority. And not by choice, it just happens that way.
Right.
And a lot of people do tell me in the class that, gee, you speak very, very well. And so for that particular reason, it kind of encourages me, you know. I motivate people. I become motivated myself by motivating others. When I see people that seem like they enjoy what I say or what I do or how I act, then that motivates me to do better.
Talk about the passion for a little bit, and how does that play in one becoming an effective speaker? Passion.
Well, you have to like what you do. Well, that's one of the reasons why I'm doing what I. People thought I should have retired a long time ago. I'm in my 70s, but I'm just really getting started. I have the desire to. I believe that the more you learn, you're never too late to learn, and the more you learn, the better off you are. When you stop learning, you might as well pull the earth over you. I believe that yesterday is a canceled check and tomorrow's a promissory note. No matter how many times, it's not how many times you stumble, it's how many times you get up.
Right.
And I also believe that many times miracles knock on our front door. We're out in the backyard looking for 4-leaf clovers. And I've always believed that if I gave you a fish today, you'll be back tomorrow looking for another fish. But if I teach you how to fish, you got to fish for the rest of your life. And you'll be a fisherman of men.
Absolutely.
So one of the reasons why I think that I really enjoyed it, I know that I enjoy this so much, and believe me, like everyone else, I've been clobbered in life like a lot of people have, bankruptcy, divorces, separation, whatever thing. But I've taken those stones of adversities, and I encourage everybody to do the same, to build a foundation to step up on. I also let people realize that you can, only difference between a rut and a grave is the fact that the rut is kicked out of both ends. And the only reason why we see the road paved from our house to our job is so we don't see ourselves running to a rut. I like seeing people become motivated, and I like to see people be better speakers. That's one of the reasons why I wrote my book. And I guess what I want to do it more now than ever is because I'm listening to a lot of young people. I remember talking some time ago after I had heard I can't think of his name offhand. I just got it in my fingertips. It's my website there. But it was said that by one of our great comedians that a lot of the young black men and women are not speaking, young adults are not speaking very well today, and a lot of slang and what have you. And I listened to that, and I got thinking about it. Perhaps who's teaching them? It's not just our minorities in general. The children today is and a lot of different acronyms and
Do you
different
think
faces.
television has an effect
I
on
think
that
that has a great effect on it, but also it's peer pressure. It's what people hear. The hip hop session things we have today and what have you, kids are learning to abbreviate a lot and in their conversations and what have you, and they need someone to instruct them. I would like very much, if I could, was to teach people how to be able to speak better so they can interview better for jobs. So they'll be able to, they're going to be the future. They're going to be the people who are going to be taking the places of us as we move on. They'll be our future politicians, they'll be the future preachers, they'll be the future of everything that we have. And if they don't know how to speak well or to be able to conduct themselves well in a conversation, they might impede their progress. And I think that the better they can speak, the better they express themselves, I think the better they would succeed in growth.
Now, with your experience in speaking, and even with training speakers, what is it that separates the good ones from the really great ones? What makes a Tony Robbins or a Zig Ziglar or a Les Brown? What is it that separates?
It's the passion, which you asked me before, belief in what you do. It's the same when I speak and lecture or when I just present for a living, the training that I do, which is training is very much required before people go to work on the hazardous waste site. I really get into it. I could be dead tired, very much out of it. I may even be sometimes ill when I come in. But once I get on the stage where I get in front of people, I have to perform. They're paying me. They expect to get something out of it. I want them to leave in with a good intent because I want them to come back again. My livelihood depends upon refresher courses too, and continual training of those people. So I have to do my very best. And I think the reason being is why Tony Robbins and Les Brown and all the rest of them, they know that the better they do, the better and the more they earn. It has some sort of a motivation is because no one wants someone who just can get up there and stutter and stammer. They want someone who can motivate them and keep them really excited.
Now, you briefly touched on, you said something about confidence. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more and how confidence plays into becoming a good speaker?
Yes, most people, even dignitaries, even our most people are involved with the public for a great extent, have a tendency to be nervous. Nervous is the reason why most people, they may be delivering their speech seemingly okay, but underneath the table or podium, the legs are shaking, their knees are knocking, and really they feel that they're not as comfortable as they like to be. That is the greatest thing that most speakers look for when they want training. They want to be able to get out and be more confident in speaking, because people can tell in the audience whether or not they are sincere. They can tell whether or not they are nervous. They themselves come off nervous in terms of their actions and body language. And so the more confident they are, the more better eye contact they have, the more better they express themselves, the way they work their modulation from the smallest, lightest, softest sound to the loudest, and how they can reach their audience.
Now, with these special gifts, oftentimes comes animosity and jealousy. I don't care if it's a great singer or a top cardiac surgeon in the country, they all experience such. Have you ever come across a situation where someone either overtly or covertly felt this way about you because of the way they spoke, because of the way you spoke? In other words, have you seen or heard of any jealousy from colleagues, peers, or those in the audience? And if so, how'd that make you feel?
Well, sometimes you get it even from family. Family sometimes often think that perhaps maybe that, you know, every time you turn around, we see you. And I've been in a lot of magazines and a lot of newspapers, Black Enterprise. I've been in the Jet and Ebony and what have you. And even my own family said, well, why are you always in the news? You know, why are you always doing this and that? And I'll tell you why. This is very important. If everything had been given to me in life where I'd have a silver spoon in my mouth, the parents were together, and I lived a nice, comfortable life like my children have, perhaps maybe I wouldn't strive so hard. But because when I was coming along, people told me I'd amount to nothing, that I was a bastard child, and being honestly saying that because I didn't have a father and what have you, they knew my situation. I've even had relatives tell me I wasn't going to get anywhere. Because of all that, as I worked very hard to just prove and show them that I could. Even when I was going into this business, I was told that you're not going to make it in this business. Who's going to buy your services for training and teaching? Who wants to be taught how to work safely on a hazardous waste site? Well, needless to say, you can see the numbers of which I've accomplished over the years and the success I've had. And 21 years later, I'm still in business.
Now, you had mentioned how even family can have a tendency to come down on one. And you use that as a motivational tool?
Exactly.
Okay. How does, well, actually, I've seen that a lot with people, even with those that I've interviewed. They've told me that it's almost like they're trying to succeed because someone else told them that they couldn't do it. I just found that fascinating.
Well, one of the reasons why there's a lot of jealousy, some people have shortcomings themselves. They have an inferiority complex. They feel that, you know, why should you be getting this? Why shouldn't you? You're not supposed to do this and that. Why, you know? Especially those who knew earlier on, not having the education they had earlier, didn't have earlier on, why I succeeded so well. And then later on, of course, you know, when you get the doctors and what have you, they think you have too much education. But one of the things that you have, and going back to, you know, I'm one of the very few minority-owned companies that teach health and safety training. and you can almost count them in your hand, especially in the northeastern part of the country. And when a lot of my customers come here that are non-minorities, they're a little shocked at first to see after looking at, and it says Professional Safety Training Service, the website and everything is professional.
Yes,
And when they
not.
come here, they stop and they see, and they might be a little shocked, but a lot of times they don't show it. A lot of times you want to get in the class and they want to take over and take control and think they know more. And of course they
Yes.
have to lock their heels and let them know who is the instructor and take control. But once they're here for a short period of time, they seem to enjoy the training,
Right.
and they always walk away giving a good evaluation. But it's always natural for people to prejudge, and it's always for people to back. I really personally have not, because I'm not the person that type of person that things bother me, have seen too much of that of jealousy. If they have it, it hasn't really shown too much. I myself personally, except for the family members have told me, and that's uncles and what have you, that knew my situation, that my kids are going to do better than yours when I was a little kid coming up, and I was heard that. But then when later on, in later years, they told me that when I was able to do things for them, when the kids did do, and recognize them and gave them the respect, they said, you know, we're very proud of you. And it made me feel good. So I strive very hard. And there was one time I really wanted to be in the newspapers and magazines a lot because it gave me that motivation to know that I could do it. Well, you know, that's kind of natural. Let me give you a good example, and I'll get back to myself in a moment. But I like to relate to other situations that tie into the same thing. When I go down to the Virgin Islands and teach, and I travel quite a bit in my company, going down to Virgin Islands, that's part of the Region 2, United States Virgin Islands, that is. When you get down and I speak to them nice and clear. And they sound nice and clear with just a little bit of dialect. When they talk among themselves, they talk very fast, and they sound like they're talking a foreign language, because they are they're used to hearing each other talk. And I have a hard time understanding what they're saying. But when they talk to me, they talk very plain. I think people have the tendency to adapt to the situation. When I'm talking, for instance, during an interview, or to someone for a job, or for someone I'm trying to sell a proposal to, or even doing just being interviewed as a speaker, naturally I want my words and everything to be very clear. It's very important to be impressed that person that I'm talking to. Then there's a time when I talk to friends or what have you that I'll talk the language. But it's not that the blackness or comes out or whatever. It's just that there's a time and a place for different types of talk. I try not to revert back to any slang if I can help in any circumstances. I try to speak well at all times. Perfect practice makes perfect performance. And when you do it all the time, you become better at it. So I may have friends that may think that, but nobody really tells me that. So I have not really had that many people tell me that, talk differently when I'm around them or someone
Gotcha.
else.
Gotcha.
But I know it does happen.
Now, earlier in our conversation, you said that whites have told you that you were articulate. Did you think that was like a left-handed compliment?
No, I look at it as a compliment, period. I look at it as a compliment, period. I haven't really had too many situations, and I may have had one or two say, gee, you speak very well. Or I've even had people tell me I write well, or you write very well for a man. You know, a man writes better than a woman writes better than a man. I've heard a lot of that, too. I mean, naturally, you're going to have people that are a little surprised. I always often think, like our new president, that a lot of people are very impressed with the way he speaks. I knew an president-elect, mainly because of the simple fact he puts his point across, and his temperament is so great. And they're shocked because they're used to hearing people
I think
with
shocked
slang.
is a better word.
Yes, they're shocked because they expect a person to come off like we listen to a lot of our athletes, and they sound like even though they've gone to college, they sound like they're still learning how to speak, and they speak very poorly, and they expect everyone to speak the same. And I think they think that. But they're more shocked when you do speak well, and they think also, of course, naturally, that you're putting on an act. But it's natural. For me, it is.
Now let's jump back to your students in the Universal Speakers Bureau. Is there any one common flaw that you see amongst them, something that jumps out that most of them do that somehow needs to be corrected?
Many people don't look directly at an audience because they have that nervousness. Nervousness is the key. That's why I stress not so much how to be a great speaker. A lot of people have the ability to speak fairly well, but I want people to be able to project their voice to an audience. I want them to talk to an audience. If they're looking at the ceiling, looking around elsewhere, or they're looking too hard at one particular group of people and not looking at everyone, people in the audience will feel somewhat slighted. Or if they're looking down at the paper and you're looking at the top of their head and not looking at them while they're talking, most people are not interested in hearing that. They can read. You might as well give them what they have and let them read it. So I try to emphasize, if I can, on how to be a better and more persuasive presenter. And that's one of the biggest problems a lot of people have. Not the proper body language, tapping on the podium with a pen, jingling change in their pocket, or really not really feel like they're talking to an audience. And the biggest problem we have, which I find when I'm teaching, is that people just have that tendency to ignore the audience. And I try to bring them back and let them make the audience feel very comfortable. That's the biggest problem I think a lot of them have.
Talk a little bit about how our emotions play a part in our speaking, whether it's sadness, happiness, fear, or anger. How can these emotions help positively affect or negatively affect speech?
That's a very good question, because when I speak, no matter what, I like to paint pictures when I speak. I like to have, when I speak, I want people to really picture what I'm saying, because a picture's worth 1,000 words. An actual practical application is actually worth more than pictures. And demonstration of something being done where people actually do it is worth thousands of pictures and also really demonstrations. So I think that when you speak, a person must be able to have people just picture in their mind. Picture in their mind what you're saying so that they would get the visualize that. A lot of people just listen to speech. Everybody else clap, they clap. Everybody stand up, they stand up. Everybody sit down, they sit down. But did they really get the message? So the most important thing, I think, if anyone is speaking, they have to make sure that what they're speaking on is best understood, because that's communication. It's best heard to a point where everybody will feel it affects them. Just like a good minister, a good preacher. Do you ever give, well, don't want to ask you the question so much, but a lot of times people will get up and they'll preach, and you actually feel like the preacher's talking to you.
Absolutely.
You feel like, gee, he's talking just directly to me. And there are other times people are pointing their finger while there's three of them pointing right back at them. So you have to realize that it depends upon how your message is getting across, body language, eye contact, and the trustworthiness of their the truthfulness of their speaking. I mean, is it really something that can affect you? Is it something that you want to learn? Is it something that you can take away from that speech?
Now, when someone's delivering a speech and something has happened in the past that has triggered an emotion, let's say if they're feeling sad or happy or angry at the time, how can one control those emotions and not let them affect the speech that they're giving?
Sometimes I think emotions are good for an audience, especially if, in fact, you have someone that passed away, and you have to speak on the heels of that. If something has happened to someone that you know that's really detrimental, or someone has been out of work, or something that, and people can relate to that. And sometimes it's good to inject that. And then when you inject it, you might see a little pause. You might even see a tear now and then. People in the audience are affected by that. And then you collect your composure. Sorry about that. That happened sometime. I just couldn't help thinking about that. But getting back to where we were talking about, and people can relate to that.
Okay.
You know, one wants anybody to come off and they feel like they're so hard that they don't have any emotions. And no one wants the people to dwell on and cry and sob through the whole thing either. But they want some compassion. And as far as emotion and passion is concerned, emotion and passion is concerned, when you get up and you can smile and you can really get excited, voice modulation and gestures, and make people like they're part of it, and not be glued right behind the podium, but get out and make people feel like they're part of what you're talking about, you've motivated the audience, and that's important.
Can you think of any great speakers from the past who have been able to bring forth their emotions and give a fantastic speech whom you've admired?
Oh, definitely, no doubt about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., of course. I happened to march with him. And I also was down in Washington, D.C. at the monument, millions of people. And I know when I heard that voice down distinctly, and just as a young man, I mean, I have articles that show that I had gotten very much involved with that. The fact of the matter is just to hear the voices of his voice, that was one thing. People didn't really appreciate it so much until later years. But the fact of the matter is that...
Really?
Well, a lot of people who were, as you know, that were against him, and a
That's
lot of
true. At
whites
the
as well as
time.
blacks,
Hmm.
thought he was
Yes.
too peaceful as opposed to being more militant. You know that.
Yes.
I mean, I'm sure you know that, rather. Excuse me. And then a lot of people have had the tendency to think that, you know, normally people are martyred and more, or appreciated more after they've gone. But as listening to his speech and really putting himself on the line at a time that when it was very not very difficult to do it,
Hmm.
and motivating the audience and myself to a point where you really wanted to get involved in in a movement, that made me feel very good
So
to hear that.
being there, do you remember the crowd's reaction? Do you remember the faces, how they were affected? And can you
Very
talk a
much
little bit
so,
about
very
that?
much so. It was a time when we may not speak to each other in the street, where everybody was hugging each other, people leaning on each other, people were crying together, people were hugging each other, people were shaking hands with each other, people were agreeing with each other. It was a time when, just like when the World Trade Center or anything else going where people come together at a crisis, it was that type of a situation. It was also that type of situation, the Million Man March. Whenever people come together for a particular reason, it'll be the same situation when the inauguration in the 2009 for our new president, white and black and all colors shaped from coming together for a common cause. When they are moved by an individual or a particular cause or some sort of even type of tragedy, like well, down in New Orleans and down when that happened and Rita and all that. I go to all these places. OSHA contacts me and I go. The emotions of people who even had prejudice against another race come together under the adversities. And for that particular reason, that particular time. Now, perhaps maybe people forget about times that things go on, but at that particular moment, it really affects you. And yes, I was really moved by that. And that's just the one person. And of course, there's many other speakers that I've listened to over the years. I can't remember all of them, but I do a lot of reading. And I always try to, Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill rather. I read a lot of little books and that show you how to succeed. And I've used a lot of that strategy.
Well, we're just about towards the end. I want to ask you, what advice would you give young people as far as public speaking is concerned? How can they improve themselves? And by speaking well, where can it take them?
Well, first of all, one has to see themselves before they can present themselves to others. They need to stand in front of a mirror, and they have to hear themselves talk. Well, so often people go out and they just speak, and it comes off the top of their head. What they learn in the street, what they learn from the home, what they learn from their environment is basically what they are going to repeat and say. If all their associates in school and different places that are, even those that come from prison, are speaking a certain way and doing a certain same, they're going to adhere the same way. It's not even from what the parents teach. The parents may teach them well, but the peer pressure and what they hear, the way they dress, clothes almost falling off of them, hats backwards, and all the things that they do, that they learn and see, they're going to do the same identical thing because of the simple fact that's just peer pressure. How I would teach them to do that, what I would do is encourage them, number one, to get all the education they can get. That's very, very important. To associate with positive thinking people, to be able to learn, read, listen to tapes that will give them encouragement. Listen to them constantly, and then practice speaking. Listen to their voice. That's important. Associate with people who are speaking well. Get away from people or around people if they really want to be speakers. Now, they have to want to do it. It's not just something that's happened just because they're going to be around those people. They got to want to try to be there. And if they really want to, then they have to train their associates and who they associate with so that they can be around people with positive thinking, with people who speak well, and take speaking courses. That's very important.
Wonderful. Well, Dr. Williams, we want to thank you so much for participating in this interview, and we will certainly let you know when the documentary film is wrapped up so you can
Okay.
get your copy.
Very good. Thank
You
you.
so much.